Hey everybody, my name's Josh, and today we're going to talk about our initial transplant. We're going to talk about all the supplies needed, the pros, the why we do it, and all our environmentals. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Why do we transplant our clones from a 1.5 inch cube into a 4 inch cube? Most importantly, it's going to create more growing room to facilitate strong root development. This is going to be everything as the plant grows from a very small clone into a mature plant. It's going to need to continuously push roots, This will allow more space for those roots to go into. The pros, as I just stated here, it's going to encourage that root development. The largest one though is it's going to really create a strong foundation, and that's going to be incredibly key for the road ahead with this plant. Diving into our environmentals, we have our temperatures between 78 and 81 degrees with a sweet spot right at that 80 mark. We have our humidity. I can't really stress this one enough, is going to be the most important environmental for the whole process. You need to get your humidities up in your room so that way they're not coming from a high humidity area into a low one. That will stress your plants. So what we have here is between 60 and 80% with a sweet spot at 70. Next, we have our CO2 levels. Just natural CO2 levels are going to be fine. There's no need to spike or drop your CO2 in the room. Just natural CO2 levels will be just fine. Our lighting, we want to have indirect lighting. That's going to be incredibly key because there will be a sulfur dunk between coming out of the clone dome and going into a 4 inch cube. At that point, if they're under direct light, it can cause a lot of damage to the plant. So you want to make sure that there's indirect lighting for where these 4x4s end up. Now for feeding, it's very important that we have a feed immediately following the transplant. The cube will be full of reverse osmosis water, and we want to go ahead and push that out with a good feed. It's going to be key. All right, so for another incredibly key part of the process, it is going to play into our humidities as well, will be the acclimation of the dome. And so once you start seeing the first few roots pop out, at that point you want to turn the lids of the dome, the little circles there, you don't want to open those about 25%. That will move the humidity in the dome from 90 to 100%, and it'll begin to lower it. As you begin to lower it, it will begin to acclimate the plants, which is very key because they're going to be eventually in a normal veg room, and that humidity will be about 55%. So the morning of is another key part of the puzzle as well. We want to go ahead and prop the dome up to where there's a gap between the lid of the clone dome and the actual tray of the clone dome. This little airway will allow for it to get further acclimated into the room before it reaches that, like I said, 55%. When you do acclimate the dome the morning of, you also want to make sure that you're increasing the humidity levels in your veg room or the nursery or wherever you actually have your clone transplant going on. So for our supplies, we have the top of the list here is the most important part. It's going to be healthy clones. If your clones are not healthy, do not force this process. And by healthy, I want to see strong white roots coming out of the plant. We're going to need 4x4 cubes as we're going to be transplanting into 4x4 cubes. We're going to need gloves. We're going to need sulfur. There will be a dunk in sulfur between the process here from coming out of the clone dome and going into the 4 inch cube. And then lastly as well, I have it here. It's part of your environmentals. If for some reason you do not have a humidifier in your room, you need to get one so that way you can increase the humidity level up to the 70% sweet spot that we're looking for the transition process. And with that, we went over the supplies needed, we went over the environmentals, and we went over the why of it. Let's go ahead and get some plants and get started. All right, so we're back with the supplies that we need. We have our 4x4 cubes being soaked right now. We also have our plant tags. So for our 4x4 cubes, we want to let them soak for about 20 to 30 minutes. Soaking in reverse osmosis water will actually bring down the rock wool's acidity, which is going to be key when introducing plant roots to it. So this will stay in here for about 20 to 30 minutes. For our example today, we have a 1 gallon bucket, but we'd never do it like this. We have 50-gallon reservoirs. You want to go ahead and use a large reservoir, but for this example, like I said, this 1 gallon bucket is going to be perfect. As you can see as well, if I push it down, there are no air bubbles that are coming out of it, which means that the cube is fully saturated and ready to go. When we pull the cube out of the water, because it has been soaked in there for probably 30 minutes at this point, we're going to squeeze it to release all the moisture as much as we can. There we go, it should be good. We will leave the plastic sleeve on it, and we'll set it down with all the other 4x4 cubes. Leaving the plastic sleeve on it is key because if you don't and the rock wool is exposed to direct light, that will actually create algae growth, and we don't want that for our plants. So leave that plastic sleeve on there until we transplant it again for the final transplant. Once you have all of your 4x4 cubes lined up, at which point you can go ahead and introduce your plants and we'll get to transplanting. All right, so we are back with our clones. We have our sulfur ready to go. I got my little stir stick here. Make sure you have one as well so that way it doesn't kind of clump up. And then we have our 4x4 cubes ready to go as well. So as you can see, we've already acclimated the dome. There's significant airflow going on right here, which is perfect, getting the plant ready to go into its new environment. We'll take our first girl here. As you can see as well, we have significant root growth, not too much, but definitely nice clean white roots coming out. At this point, we're gonna go ahead and put her upside down, dunk her right into the sulfur, pull her out. We're gonna shake her off. We don't want all that sulfur getting on the rock wool at all. So you wanna give it a good shake, truly allowing that sulfur to go elsewhere. At which point, you're gonna set her right into the cube, squeeze her right in. Make sure she's not dripping too much. Go ahead and take your plant tag with your state compliance and set it right over the top of them. Good to go, there's one. So we'll do it again. We got 4 of these that we're gonna transplant today. Nice clean white roots. Dip. Shake. Very important as well, the rock wool does not come in contact with the sulfur. That can just cause more problems for us. Give her some shakes. Looking good. And right on in. Take our state compliance, metric tag ID, set it right over it. For our third one, there we go. We got nice clean white roots again. We're gonna dip her. Make sure it's thorough. Shake it off. At which point she's going right in. Our metric tag, right over. And for our last one that we have here that we're gonna show, once again, we got great root development coming out. Go ahead and drop her down. Don't let that rock wool touch the sulfur. That will cause problems. Will definitely stunt their growth. Shake it off. And then it's going right in the 4x4 rock wool cube. Plant tag over the plant. Now these clones are ready to go ahead and get watered in and be with the rest of their friends.